All right. Hey, Luis.
Hey, Ethan, how you doing?
Good. 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 All right. This should definitely go well with your book, American Genocide.
Mm.
So that's what we'll be doing today. All right. Let's just go right into it. How about that? The
Need to get a pencil. Where's my pencil though?
okay, California's genocide. All right. So it kind of parallel histories with what we were just talked about with gold, right? The Black Hills and gold being found in 1873, which basically made the government not, um, they were basically broke the treaty. And so California genocide starts out with the gold rush, right? But so this is the genocide specifics, right? So you have to define first what a genocide is. And a genocide is defined, wait, hold on. Someone's in the waiting room, I think. Okay. So a genocide is defined it's mass violence carried out to destroy a people. And these are the terms that United Nations recognized was a crime under international law in 1948, such as any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in part or in whole a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, including killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births, forcibly transferring children of the group to another, right? We just heard about that with so the boarding schools would be the type of genocide. Yeah, because what you got to think about it. So by ruining people's families and birth rates and so on and so forth, you're literally ruining, you're killing the whole group eventually. That's the end result. So the genocide happened from 1846 to 1873. As we talked about before, Americans were already here before the Mexican-American War. So they were already killing Indians. Basically, the worst of the worst were the ones to come. Just like in the Spanish period, the worst of the worst came to California. The worst of the worst came here with nothing to lose, searching for riches. This coincides with the gold rush in particular. So what you see here is at the epicenter of the gold rush is the killings of, hundreds of Indians by militias, U.S. soldiers, vigilante groups, Native people in California. So here's the thing. So you got to look at these little dots. So this is how you would look at it. The big dots are 100 or more people killed. The small dots are less than 100. And these are the reported incidents in each county. So notice San Diego, we only have 2 incidents of between 5 to 199 killed in these are reported, right? A lot of these are up here. There was a newspaper called the Alta California, and it basically reported all these deaths. So when you read about the genocide in California, you'll almost all of them are referring to news articles or people bragging about it. I killed such and such Indian. So this is basically the American genocide no one knows about to some extent, that period of time. Here's the dots. The little diamonds are natives killing non-natives. So they put that in there. If you look at the diamonds, they're like not barely ever there, right? Riverside, it's probably Quitson, I guess. I don't know. San Bernardino. Go ahead, Luis. Hold on, let me unmute you. Wait, where are you?
What's the source of that map?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll do that in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cool though. So let me get through it and I'll tell you. Good question. So I don't know what happened to my slides right here. So yeah, so here's a little zoom in of that, and basically, this is bearing witness to the genocide, specifically in testimonials, written documents. Yeah, so there's way more, or that oral weren't transmitted but orally and died with certain families. So these are the written document portions that were documented. San Diego, noticed the genocide almost. So here's the thing. So we did a genocide conference. I'll just stop talking or sharing. So we did a genocide conference, and I always felt weird when they say, like, first of all, we had a genocide conference here, and the natives were saying, "Oh, the genocide was done to us the local ones," and I always felt that, well, all the material we have is from not here, right? So it's this larger thing we know happened statewide, but the local story has never been told. So this is something that happened. This is what really started my journey. Was I wasn't okay with that, like the plant, like imposing their story on ours, and then being okay. I know the story now, and that's what it largely it felt like. Your question, Luis, what does it feel like to be Kumeyaay? That's what it feels like. You're never getting your specific story. It's okay, this happened to this tribe, so and this is how teachers have taught this course, Kumeyaay history, before, is they're not really telling our story. They're using other people's stories, almost like the Indian movement, where a person's history and culture is lost, so you borrow from another. That's largely how I view the Pan-Indian movement. So we basically adopted the Plains culture because ours was taken from us, and I was never happy about that. And so that's how our history is largely done. The genocide story is done. It's always taking someone else's story and then somehow making it Kumeyaay history. And I was never okay with that, because I knew that there's differences and subtle differences and drastic differences throughout every single tribe. So here's what and so here's what I found. I understood this to be is why. Okay, so here's why that looks like that, and that looks like that. Okay, let me ask you a question. Maybe Luis knows. What do you think for the reason? That's a good. This was a question that I finally understood. I don't think I got it right at once. But why? So how come? Where's the genocide in San Diego? What happened?
Well, I would say, one, we may not know it all, but two, it happened more in Northern California because that was where the bigger population went from 1840s to 70s. That's where it started. The Bay Area, San Francisco, and in particular for the U.S. San Diego still had more, I think, more of a Mexican influence. Also, I think, having read parts of his book, I haven't finished it because it's just so horrific. I can only read it in parts. So many people came down from Oregon. Those Oregon guys were coming into California, just massacre like mad. But there was more white population in the Bay Area, Sacramento, and north. I don't know if Oregon, because Oregon, I think, was settled more. But so I'd say two things. One, where the population of white people were, and two, that's where the government was. And then two, that maybe we had fewer and we had more of a Mexican influence in Southern California. But I don't know. That's a guess.
No, that's very good. So you definitely complement what I was about to say in a very good way. So here's the story. So what Luis said, plus this, all these are mission. The whole where the missions were, there's no Indians to kill because the missions already killed them. That's the story. So the mission started at San Diego and goes all the way to San Francisco, right? San Francisco is the last mission. San Diego is the first mission. The missions killed us already with disease and forced labor, malnutrition, all the terrible things missions did to us, killed us. And the missions also ruined our birth rate. So the missions may have not killed us outright, but with what the Padres did, how they did it, their structure of work, their everything. They, again, remember I talked about initiation rites and puberty ceremonies prepared you for motherhood. They took that away. So the infant mortality rate went to the roof. And so that's the story. In addition to what Luis said, that all the white settlers were coming from Oregon. The influx was because of gold. And the other part of the story is if gold was found down here, there would be not one Kumeyaay left. I guarantee that, right? So thank God gold wasn't found, or I wouldn't be here, or a version of me wouldn't be here, right? So
Although it was found in Julian in
Julian, correct. And you
1880.
can go up there and actually mine gold for fun now, apparently. Yeah, but it paled in comparison, right, to Sacramento. So that's the gist of the genocide story. Obviously, there's much more to it, but that's why. The other thing is I'll show you. The beginning of the genocide started with a declaration from, well, before that, but what was his name? Burnett, the governor. Burnett, or hold on. It's God, let me find that genocide letter. Hold on. Give me a second or two. So basically, the governor of the United States, of California, excuse me, put a bounty on the heads of all Native Americans in California. Where did I put that? I thought I had a little packet. Anyways, yeah. So basically, he says the first governor, first of all, was a Southern. What do you call it? He liked slavery. Right? He wanted California to be a slave state, and he was a Southern sympathizer. And so he wanted to basically exterminate us. So what it all boils down to is this: that what Dunbar Ortiz said in the beginning of this course was settler colonialism was genocidal, right? The whole thing is a genocidal operation where you remove the original inhabitants and then you create a whole new world, right? A new history. You erase everything, including their bones, from the ground. And that's what America is to a Native American. So when you look at the border wall over here, they're desecrating our ancestors. There's so much more than just our ancestors, but it's basically, it's the symbolic act that they've done this whole time. And it's not more than, it's a literal act, but there's also symbolism in it. And we see that. So it's this complete erasure of our ancestors, of our histories. And in place of that, you have a new history. You have new founding fathers, right? So that's what bothers us all the time when we're celebrating Father Sarah, right? We're celebrating all these people who are just here a blip on the time continuum of history, right? They're just here a little portion of history. If you look at the whole thing, Kumeyaay's have been here this long. They've been here this long. Yet all we do is talk about Father Sarah, the founding fathers, blah, blah, blah. And that's, as natives, we're like, Well, we have founding fathers that have been here for maybe 100,000 years or more. If as time goes on, we'll probably see that we were here a lot longer than it's been guesstimated. So you have this complete erasure, and with these two moments in time, right, with the gold rush and the Black Hills, they're the one and the same, right? They're the exact same design the government had always had planned, which was to erase, massacre all the buffalo, right? 60 million buffalo were exterminated. That's a genocide of animals, of diversity. So you have this complete multiple accounts. These are only two that I'm giving you, but I think they get to the point of the whole story. And now you can transpose these ideas and these stories on every other Indian nation in this country, and it's going to be the same story. And as you go on even farther into political science, into Latin America, into the Philippines, into Japan, you have this colonial mentality and mindset that America always has, and it kept going. It kept going when it went to Japan, Commodore Perry, all these. So there's instances time and time again where this settler colonial mentality is continued, and it was birthed, if you will, with the Native American experience. And that in essence is the seeds of its own destruction, I would even say, as we're going into almost an apocalypse of history, end times, if you will. I mean, it's 111 in El Cajon right now. And I'm like, my wife and I are just sad that our kids have to grow up in this world that sucks now. I mean, I remember I lived in Verona when I was in the 80s, and we had a whole different climate, and we had frogs, and we had our oak trees were beautiful, and now they're all like basically not, they're all brown now. And it's just so sad, because this whole thing the US has perpetuated is where it's like we finally have to pay the debt now as a society. And it's really sad when you see, did you watch the debate last night with Trump? And he's saying, oh, they're hating America. It's like, no, it's like that's his idea because we're telling the truth about America. It's not hating America, it's telling the truth. And I would say this: if you love this country, like I do, I love the planet Earth. I love my family. I love my tribe. Like, I'm going to tell the truth so we can change. So it's so funny how information is now weaponized, and you can't say the truth, and then you're not a patriot anymore, and you hate your country. It's like all these things are missing the point of, look what this country has done and continues to do. And if we don't change, we're going to be on a path that is irreversible if we're not already there. And it's really important to study this history, and to keep studying history, and study political science, and study modern conflicts and all that, because it's all, a lot of these concepts. My point is it's two sides of the same coin, and it's really crazy, because I do have a degree in political science, right? So I've been watching and seeing these common themes throughout the Middle East, and it's like, man, it's not that difficult. That's what I would like to say. These concepts in this course, and it will question your, I guess, maybe how you believe and prior to taking this course. And anyway, so I have a vet, right, BJ, in my Kumeyaay class, right? He's cool, huh, Luis? So I have a vet that, like, after taking my courses, he's like, man, he used to be like, I ruined his image, right, of this country. And that's what I hope I continue to do. I want to ruin your image of this country, because it's not American history. That's what I would say. So this is American history, and it is what it is. And you can be patriotic or not. That's up to you. I tend to still love my country and my city and my state and my tribe, but it just takes a little more effort. Yes, right. It takes a lot more effort for me to be an optimist now than 20 years ago. Like, I don't know. What do you think, Luis? Are you optimistic still?
Well, depends upon the day, but
Yeah.
I'm
I'm rambling.
I think how I look at it is when you get really discouraged about,
Mhm.
COVID, racial injustice, economic injustice, the election, that if you do just decide, oh, I'm just going to pretend it's not all there and be optimistic,
Yeah,
that's worse. That's much worse. We need to, and that's what your whole thing is about, learning your history. I think
yeah,
so much of our culture, and I lived that way a long time, you just live in this little bubble of everything's wonderful and happy, and I've got a good job and I'm making money, and you can
yeah,
ignore and you can just deny it so
right.
easily. And our culture encourages us to deny it because they want us to keep just plugging away and paying our taxes, even though somebody else might not be.
Yeah,
So you still have to say it's worth being kind of down and out about it. And as you say, BJ getting, having a different perspective on his country and go, okay, now what do we do about it? How do
yeah.
we help change? But I do have to say, here's another trend that I think Mattingly was one of the things that just blew me away early on in his book. And I mentioned Mattingly's the guy who wrote the book American Genocide. That's
Oh,
all about.
madly. You're saying it wrong.
I'm saying it wrong. Madly. I actually have it here because I was looking for that book. So
Yeah.
it's all about California genocide that Ethan's talking about. And in there early on, when California, we'd had our Mexican-American War, so now we were an independent, I guess, as a territory. We now had to apply to become a state. And so part of those requirements were to create a constitution. And I think it was 41, you might correct me, Ethan, 41 men, of course, there weren't any women, 40 men were elected, or somehow he didn't go into now this commission to write the Constitution for California, to propose it to the US government, to first write it and stamp it and propose it. And in this dialogue, and because of who was living here, there were some Mexicans on it, and some of those Mexicans were, according to him, had indigenous and Indian heritage as well. And during the debate about what role Indians should play and whether they could be citizens, it was, and whether they would be slaves, and what, the whole thing. The vote came, it was 50-50, it was 20-20. And the commissioner of that group broke the tie, and it was 21. So it was one person. I mean, it's kind of like today, a real split. So if it had gone the other way, we might not have had that same kind of settler colonialism that was so brutal and greedy. Half of them were in favor of giving the Indians rights, but they got scared with the way he writes it, is that, well, you know what? Some rancher could go and make all his Indians vote this way to get elected. That was part of their excuse, that they could manipulate the system. Anyway, that to me is so tragic that back in 1849, at least California did not vote to be a slave state, because that was on the thing too. But one vote made the difference as to how the natives were looked at and treated, and therefore that's when they got the extermination doctrine, or whatever you want to call it. So it's just, vote. I guess the thing is their vote, and talk to everybody. And I mean, that was a bigger kind of vote than we get to. But
Yeah, that's when voting is just beyond important. But we elected one of our chairwoman, Lisa. She got it by one vote. So everyone said that they put Lisa in office because you did, right? Your one vote did. So yeah, so California largely though, it doesn't have too many redeeming qualities though, I would say. For the Native Americans, the genocide is the worst thing that America ever did, some would argue. Next to the Black Hills, it's up there, right? Like, it's hard to say what's the worst thing this country ever did. But I would say the genocide was perhaps one of them. So this was the first book to come out. It was Murder State, pretty big, and it actually was done before though. So there's another one. So Jack Norton, this was like one of the first ones, I think. It's, what is it? Genocide in Northwestern California. Mm-hmm. Again, Northwestern, right? So what about Kumeyaay? And I'll answer that question at the end of this class. So there's murder state. There's been, and then Madley came out in 2015, and he came to Verona, and he gave a talk. You see, he signed it for me. Ethan, I hope that you find this book of interest. Really cool dude. And yeah, and then there's the Ishi books. So there's Last of His Tribe, Theodore Kroeber. This is a good introductory. Then there's In Two Worlds. I would consider this what you call it, like a good introduction to the genocide in California. And I was going to give a short chapter. So that those maps I showed you, there's a museum in Oakland. It's the Museum of California Indian, something like that. But it's in Oakland. So if you're ever in Oakland, it's the best Indian museum I've ever seen.
No.
And that's just a small port. Like it had every period in time, and it was just, you can tell these people. It's just the best museum I could have ever imagined. And we have nothing like it down here, by the way. I've never seen anything like it. Obviously, I'm a little biased as a California Indian professor, whatever you call it, whatever you want to call me. But for me, it was the ultimate experience. I couldn't believe it. And it's in Oakland, and Oakland's pretty run down. So don't go late at night, I guess. But it's really incredible, that museum. And Berkeley is about an hour away or something like that. So that's probably who did it, students at Berkeley or whatever. So if you're ever in Oakland, go check it out. And then the final thing I want to say today is, so the first thing I said about genocide in San Diego. So I poked around, I asked people, and then a lot of it, again, you have to use your imagination. So the missions wiped us out. We know that there is about at least 5 pandemics with the mission system itself, five that are known. I'm sure there may be more, where 160 people would die all at once, right? And they would just throw them in a hole, and they dug those up actually recent 30 years ago. So there's all these accounts of mass pandemics. So I guess that's relevant for today. So pandemics wiped us out. The mission system wiped us out. And then the main story is this, though. So we were the labor force of San Diego. And also we were indentured servants. So my great grandmother, Cipriana La Chapa, was an indentured servant. So she was basically a slave to some white family, probably, right? And someone would say, "Oh, it's indentured." What's the difference to me? You can't leave. You're working for nothing, housing and food. And then that's why my great grandmother wasn't raised by neither her mother or her father, because she was an indentured servant. And there's many stories like that. The women largely did that. The men did unskilled labor. You name it, they did it, right? So think of what Mexicans do today. That's what Indians were at this point in time. And so the moral of the story is, you wouldn't kill your worker, right? You wouldn't kill the labor force. You needed them. So in large, we were spared because we were the labor force. We did all the work they didn't want to do. That's another way to say it. And so you're not going to kill these folks that are, you need. And so largely the Kumeyaay were spared, the ones that were left, because of that, and because gold wasn't found in the mountains where we escaped. So we escaped to the mountains. All our coastal territory was taken from us. Inland territory was taken, and the mountains was all that was left that no one wanted. So in large part, the Kumeyaay people escaped to the mountains. That was the refuge. And so if our refuge had not been that, like I said, if there's been gold or precious metal, then I think it's easy to assume that we wouldn't be here as a people, just like so many other tribes have been completely wiped out up north. Ishi was the last of his tribe, the Yahi. And we are actually part of his language group, the Hokan language group, the Kumeyaay are. are related in our language. So you have tribe after tribe after tribe after tribe being completely wiped out with not one person left. And so that's the story of the California Indian in a nutshell. And that's the local story too. We're California Indians, and there's important differences. That's one thing I would like to highlight. Drastic experiences, and and when you study Native Americans, it's important to realize that we're not all the same. We have a very unique, different story, and Native Americans need to stop doing that too. I think we do ourselves a disservice when we group ourselves. Sometimes it's cool, but a lot of times it's like it doesn't help us either, because like I said, when I'm actually trying to find the answers, and then I have Native folks like grouping me with another tribe, it's like, well, if that's okay with you, but for me it never was, and I always wanted to get the individual tribal story. So there's a lot I would say about that. So, but the genocide, it did happen in different ways, starting from the mission period in the local level, and then as it went, we started integrating, and as like Luis said, we started mixing with the Mexicans. So you wouldn't tell the difference. There was a big point where you couldn't tell the difference between a Kumeyaay and a Mexican, and we wanted it that way. So the Kumeyaay survived by blending in with the Mexican population, by learning Spanish, by saying they're Mexican. In fact, we couldn't get a loan unless we said we were Mexican. So a lot of the elders say that, like Sister Curo Romero, of Verona, she said her dad had to say he was Mexican and speak Mexican to get a refrigerator, a freeze box. What do they call them? Those little boxes with ice box or something, like, maybe it was a car, but no, washing machine, something like that. But he had to get a loan, and they wouldn't give it to an Indian. So, on and on. And so this comes into account when you talk about blood quantum. Remember we talked about that in the first class? So now you have Indians changing their names to Mexican names, speaking Spanish, writing on documents that they're Mexican, on and on and on. And so now when you have this blood quantum thing pop up, you have a legacy of saying you're not Indian, and it doesn't make any sense that we're using these old documents. And they say, oh, well, they wrote it down on this, 1890 census. Well, yeah, because that's when you didn't want to be Indian. So you have, unfortunately, Indian people don't know the history. And then they talk about blood quantum, and it's just like, well, let's talk about 5 hours of the history first, and then talk about blood quantum, because you don't understand what blood quantum is until you know the history of why your grandma maybe lied and said she was white, why your great-grandmother said she was Mexican, and your grandfather. So we can get a homestead, right? Indians couldn't get homesteads either. So you have this really, like I said, really unique dynamic story that it took, this so many hours and time, and I finally, okay, now I kind of have an idea. But it's still unknown. But if you're aware of what was going on, you can use your imagination, right? And I think it's not that hard. So that's the local genocide story. That's the California genocide story, and hopefully you're seeing it in the larger narrative too, of what happened to the Lakota and gold and all these things, and it's all going to come full circle, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So that's my spiel.
Ethan, is there a metric that people agree with of the number of Kumeyaay that were killed and the number that escaped genocide?
What was I just reading?
Like how many were here when the missions came, and then when the mission, maybe if you just even go to 1820.
Yeah. So it was actually in this book. Did you see that? I wrote it down, but Florence said, I think it was this. I think it was, we were at 18 to begin with. After the missions, it was 15. But you have to account for the birth rate stuff, right? Then it makes sense, because what happens was, and Richard Carrico said it good in his interview, with one woman being barren or something, that's like that would be 16 future women that would give birth to another 60, so it's this exponential growth. Or opposite of that, when you take away just one woman and her womb, or her ability to produce, like when you ruin her ability to produce. And he said it way more better than that. But so you have to account for that, and that would have then you start realizing the collapse, basically the demographic collapse of our society. So I think I can roughly, yeah. So in 1860 census, there were 15,000 Kumeyaay in 1860. So that's 30 years after secularization, 25 years. In the mission history, though, 65 years of the mission history, there were 60,000 deaths and 81,000 baptisms. So that's what's recorded. So 60,000 deaths and 81,000 baptisms. So you have
that's the whole state of California?
No, that's the whole shenanigans.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's recorded, and they were pretty good at that. But again, you have to account for all these things, such as taking away our ceremonies, taking away our puberty ceremonies, so our women no longer have how to raise. I don't know if you but I don't know about you, but raising a child is really hard, and it takes all this training and all these things, and you have to know all this stuff. And by taking just that away, you can imagine a lot of kids died. So there's all these factors. And so you get to a point where after the American period, it goes from 15,000 to around 3,000, right? So our population, and that's a conservative estimate, 3,000. That's also accounting for those people who were just blended in with Mexicans. So we went from 18 before the Spanish to 15 after the Spanish to around 3,000 after the American period, like for a while. So I think at the bottom number would be maybe 1,000, 2,000 Kumeyaay left. And these were the ones that had adapted genetically to immune system, probably mixed. A lot of them were probably the mixed folks that survived, that had a certain immune systems, and it's a real complicated story, for sure. And I'm still working it out, in fact. So, but I always like to, you get the big story and then do the local story. And the local story, to be honest, has been the hard part. So
even though you said that, one of the quote advantages was that the Native Americans were an important labor source, Madley and a number of other things point out how, especially early on, there were so many Indians that they just treated them so badly because they could just go and steal some more Indians. So they basically worked them to death and then just go get some more free, because it's always been pointed out that's one of the differences between African Americans and Native Americans. African Americans, sadly, they were owned, and therefore they had a price. They had a monetary value to the owner, whereas Native Americans didn't, and they just treated them, let them die and then go steal another one somewhere.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and
maybe
exactly.
that didn't happen in San Diego, but it certainly did other places in California.
And that's a good point. People always talk about slavery and thinking of African American Black experience. Native Americans and Indians were slaves way after the Emancipation Proclamation. We were still being used as slaves, and we were treated in a lot of ways, if it could be said, worse, right? Because we weren't even property, we weren't bought and sold. We were dispensable, and we were, So it's hard to, you don't want to say worse and better, but it's hard not to, like you said, it was a little more disposable would be the right word, right? So, because you don't want to say worse or better, but certainly, yeah, we were more disposable. There was a lot of us, and it was also fulfilling that genocidal tendency of erasure, right? So we didn't want to incorporate, you know, kind of like once you're done, almost like a disposable sippy cup, or, you know, what are those red cups. You know, that's how natives were. You wanted to use it and then get rid of it. You didn't want to incorporate it in your society, make a citizen of it, make it a voter, right? Like it was literally a dehumanized object that could just be trashed and forgotten because it wasn't even human. And that's how my dad would always say, they didn't even think we were human beings. So it was a dehumanization. So, and I think that's important to realize too. What mind frame or philosophy did they have to just kill an entire people? And so you have to, that's again, you got to use your imagination. What would it take for you to exterminate an entire people? You would have to think of them as not human, as less than, as almost worse than an animal. And that's something that a lot of scholars have talked about before. Steve Newcomb's one of them, the dehumanization of Native Americans. And that's from the Spanish experience in Latin America, the American experience we're talking about now. But it was a dehumanization, and then you could discard it as if it never happened. So it's been pretty challenging to talk about genocide every semester, but usually I go in a little bit more. So anyways, let's take some questions and comments. I want to hear from the anyone really. I guess the question will be, has anyone heard about this before? Is anything new? Is there anything you are highlights that you wanted to talk about? So I'll give it a couple of seconds, then I'm gonna call on people. All right, so I guess I'm gonna call on Eric.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. There's really nothing new that I learned right now, because my sister always like talked about this type of stuff. Yeah. And I kind of learned most of this stuff from her.
Eric, are you native?
No, I am Mexican.
What does your sister do?
She is in college right now.
Where's she going?
I think Grossmont, yeah, in Grossmont.
Grossmont? Wow, so she probably took the California Indian course. That's good. Good to hear. That's what I want to hear, by the way. That's exactly what I want to hear. All right. So anyone else? Chime on in. Trying to think if there's any. Oh, there's this other one too. Hey, check this out, Luis. So this is a good one for population. So Sherburne Cook, remember we talked about him before? This is his book on California population. So 1769, right? He goes to the mission period to 1970. That's when it was written. And so he's the population guy in the fact that before Cook, they only thought there was 30,000 California Indians. After Cook did his it went up to 300,000. So and the moral of the story is this: is they always think Indians are so stupid and that we can't survive. And so that's why they say, oh, only 5,000 people could live there. Only 10,000 people. They had no agriculture. They weren't farmers. They didn't blah, 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 right? So they're always, so Cook finally says it. They know. And for instance, this area alone shouldn't have had 18,000 people on it. It should have had 10, right? But because we were so good at exploiting all these kinds of diversity of plants at different elevations, different time periods, planting, all these things. We were able to almost double the land-based capacity, what it should be. So what happened is these population figures have been constantly adjusted up, just, you know. So yeah, and then here's another one. American Holocaust is another one. So Standard, he kind of does a lot of stuff on what you call it, like he does a lot of comparisons to Americans and Hitler. So that's why he uses the Holocaust. So
And it's South America as well. It's and North America. It's not just the United States.
yeah,
So it you know, goes a lot into all the Aztecs and everything.
yeah. So yeah, it's been interesting to find the local story, but you know, and I'll just end on this. Seems like no one wants to talk to it. It's fine.
I'm going to show you a book though. Don't end till I get this book down.
All right. I'll end on one more comment. Yeah, it's so cool doing this at home. I can share all my books.
How many books do you have?
Oh my God, dude. Well, I gave all my books away 2007, and then I bought a bunch more back. So, well, my dad, actually, it's mostly my dad's. Well, I don't know, maybe 300, 400, 500, probably 300 to 400. I don't know, it'd be more like close to 2. I used to have a bunch more, but I gave away a lot, and then my dad passed, and I got my dad's library. So, pretty happy about that. No one, I didn't have to fight for it. No one reads in my family. Go ahead, Luis.
Okay, so I was cleaning my bookshelf out in COVID, although I don't have anywhere, never had that many of that. And my aunt lived in Alpine, and she was a bit of a historian. So I got this from her, and you can see it's been water damaged partly by her, but also by me. But I had forgot, you know, I didn't even remember it was on my bookshelf. But hold on, I'm gonna find the front. It's falling apart. So here's the the rest of it's much more readable. But anyway, it's a history of California, and I'm sure you know this author. I didn't, but having looked up, this is volume, I think 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And actually, no, it's volume 3. Have you read any of his stuff?
No, I'm trying to think about. I have a California book too.
It's like this one's mostly about labor, but it's so friggin' detailed. Like here's the thing. Noted mining places on the Yuba and Feather Rivers, page 82. You know, another one, Downey's advance up the mountains, how gold weighed in the early days. So there's this whole section is the northern mines. But I just can't imagine this. So this is 1898, I think, or wait a minute. I just can't imagine somebody with this, writing this in those times with this level of detail is pretty amazing.
Mm.
So I'm not a historian at all. So I admire you historians. You have to go back and read. Here's a vigilante committee of 1856. You know, it's just amazing, this book. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever read it, but it sits proudly. If I ever want some reference to go and find a certain point, which I might, because one of the things I am doing is trying to figure out what my ancestors may have done. And they were always, they had land. So they were always having land versus, you know, some nice thing about reading American Genocide is it sounds like the majority, they would definitely go and get vigilantes together from ranches, but the majority was that evil state militia. And people who were in it for their livelihood, you know, it's horrible. But anyway.
Yep. Yeah, militias were crazy. Yeah, and they had vigilante groups up there for a while because they didn't have a law. People would be the law, judge, jury, and executioner. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And it's just, I just think how scary it must have been to be Native for hundreds of years. You know, it must have been terrifying. You never know when. Today is the day.
Right.
But you know, when I'll end on this. So when I was doing my undergraduate paper, Do I have it? A copy of it? Anyways, it's like 21 pages. It was like my first time of Kumeyaay history, anything. And I've done papers on Kumeyaay history before, but it's like obviously a thesis class. You gotta. It was to get your major. It was like the final class. It's when you're a history major, and so I did history of Kumeyaay. It was literally a small version of my master's thesis. So it was like from the creation to casinos. Like I always wanted to do that from creation story to casinos. Like what is that? What's that story? And to get that story, it's like you said, Luis. It's like you got to torture yourself for years and years. And so I definitely went through the fire. And but you know, and it's so important though, the beginning of every journey. And I remember in the class there was 4, 5, 6 of us, and I remember one of them, the kid did a Midway, and I never learned about Midway, and then they just came out with a Midway movie. It's like, oh man, this is a cool story. So he did the Battle of Midway. The next one was Elvis. Some guy did his thing on Elvis. And I told him in the group, because you got to run a group, and you got to comment on people's papers. So I'm like, well, Elvis stole the blues from black people. That's what my dad always told me. And there's much more to that story, but there's truth to it. And the truth is that if a black person was doing that at the time, they would have never been discovered. So Elvis symbolically is, a slight to kind of race anyone who's aware of why he's the king of rock and roll. It's because he's white. Right? There was all kinds of black folks, if you know the history of blues and all. Anyways, he said I was full of shit. That's fine. But I'm like, hey, my dad told me all this stuff. And my dad also told me about the gold rush. And Ishi, last of his tribe, I showed you the movie yesterday. That's why I assigned this. I took it out because I feel everyone's pretty dang busy. But Last of His Tribe, we watched it so many times. And my dad we would like, play the scenes in the movie. There was a scene where Ishi builds a house and he kicks people out. He's like, Ishi house, get out of my house. And my dad would do that. He'd go, Ishi house, and he wouldn't let us in the door. And so it was kind of a family, like basically I'm kind of like Eric, because I knew about this genocide like without even knowing it. So it's something I just knew. And you either know it or you don't. It kind of sticks in your head, right? I mean, if your friend tells you about how they slaughtered a whole bunch of people. And so anyways, so I tell this girl who's doing a story on the gold rush, and her undergraduate was the gold rush. And I told her, that was the beginning of, when they slaughtered Ishi and his family and all these people. And I just said it, like, I didn't know anything beyond that, but I knew it happened. I probably didn't articulate it very well, but anyways, she comes back to me the next weeks sometime, and she says I was wrong, and that the gold rush was this great thing and all these things. It's like similar to the mission history where, there's this like myth, almost like, this really happy ending story. The gold came, California exploded, and it's one of these things that, this happened, 20 years ago, and I'll never forget it. And I'll say this story for the rest. When I go back to USD, I'm going to tell them the story. And because I want to, this shouldn't be hit, like, this shouldn't be debatable, right? Like, the freaking genocide happened. You shouldn't be at USD being there. And then the teacher, first of all, shouldn't have let it happen. The teacher should have known that. So that shows to me the teacher didn't know, right? The teacher didn't know, or she didn't have the courage to stay, and then that doesn't make sense. Well, why wouldn't a teacher have courage, right? So it's just one of these moments. What's that?
It's a Catholic school.
It's a Catholic school. But it was just like, I'll never forget this. And this is again what it feels like to be a Kumeyaay Native person at USD. You stand up in class, you tell them about a genocide that happened, and they come back and tell you you're wrong. And then you go home. I lived in Oklahoma at the time, and then I wasn't even on the res anymore. And so you just have this feeling of being completely and utterly alone. And you feel, and that's really the seeds of everything I am today. That frustration, those moments. And I think there's other people still like me out there every single day going through that. And now that I'm old enough and wise enough, I am shouting to the rooftops with love and mercy and kindness the truth that happened to the California Indian, to the Kumeyaay Indian. And hopefully as a society, we can get there because we all benefit from the truth being exposed, and we all do the opposite of benefit when it's shoved in a closet and you're like, ah, you're wrong, you know? So it's just one of these stories where I laugh now, but it really, really, really put me subconsciously on the path I am today without even knowing it. And it's a two-front war. It's not just the non-natives. You also got to fight the natives because they also have to be re-educated too. So it's a two-front war that I'm fighting. Not maybe fighting is the wrong word, but there's almost nowhere you can go. I guess that's my point. There's almost nowhere I could go at that point in my life to feel okay, and that I was right and they're wrong, and it was just an utter feeling of aloneness. So when I teach my courses now, I see that all the time. I see kids and even adults where I was 20 years ago, and the frustration they have, and the hatred and the anger and the sadness and all that, and just the bullshit they have to go through on a daily. And so I'm like, man, so I'm constantly seeing myself by being a teacher and a professor, who I was 20 years ago. So I'm always reminded of that as well, right? When I read students' papers. And so it's been a hell of a journey, to say the least. And I wouldn't change a thing. It's been cool. I dig it. Now I do. Now that it's over, right? Now I got 2 kids, a wife, and whatever. I don't got to worry about, you know, not belonging somewhere or caring what people think. But when you're young, you know, the thing is, when you're younger and you don't know things, it's like, man, just to have someone believe in you and to come from where you come from and to help you is, to me, that's hopefully going to be all the difference with our people one day. So that's kind of, that's my genocide story at USD. And I'm going to tell that story for the rest of my life. I think it's a great story. What do you think about that, Louise?
I think it's great. And I guess, you know, what's different about that than I shared those 2 that I shared with you, if you looked at them, about racism, that happened when they were kids. And so, you know, you were in college where you expect even more so that you're going to find a community that's going to be open to hearing ideas that are new to them. And even so, that was just so tragic that they went and found the information they wanted to find.
Yeah.
You know, this is an aside, but I know we're going to go in a minute. Maybe I'll put it in next week if anyone's interested. Last night, and I think tonight, and there's something else on Saturday, the Surge, I don't know if you know Surge, it's Showing Up for Racial Justice. And it's a national group, but San Diego has its own chapter. And they had a meeting last night. So it's about how to vote as an anti-racist for the California ballot measures. So if anybody, and they've recorded it. So if anybody's interested in that, so it's, you know, it's from a perspective, but it's from an anti-racist perspective on all the ballot measures that are out there right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I haven't heard that much about them yet. So this is one place to go and, you know, get the yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, I know these ballot measures. The commercials don't help, right? By the way, don't vote on a commercial because they're going to tell you nothing. No, they're just, yeah. So yeah, I'll be honest. When it comes to the ballot measures, if I don't know what I'm doing, I don't vote on it.
And that's tragic because they are really important. You know?
Yeah, but sometimes I just don't have enough time. You know.
Yeah. So I'll put this in the chat next week, and I think if you watch the hour thing, you'll know all the. I think I didn't watch it last night. I've got to go watch it. All the ballot measures from an anti-racist perspective. Now there are other perspectives, but if that's what you want to vote on, they tell you that.
I just don't want my property tax raised for nothing. I was telling my wife that. I'm like, dude, the property tax is so high. It's just like, it'd be hard for me to vote on anything to raise my property tax.
But you have to ask yourself what that does for people who are nowhere near as fortunate as you.
That's true. I know.
And that's what taxes are, if they don't go to things that are atrocious. I mean, I don't like to pay taxes either, but I believe in them. You have to support the people who can't even get a job. I mean, Disneyland, not my favorite place, but they're laying off 30,000 people in California.
That's crazy. I know. I heard that today. I was like, oh man, this is it. That's huge.
Yeah, the economic disaster from COVID hasn't really hit us yet, and it's going to.
Yeah, and all these people buying homes and this and that. It's like, dude, that's all gonna go crashing down on us. That's what I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a repeat of what 2007, right? Right before 2007, 05 and 06, everyone was going crazy, buying, selling homes, doing this, doing that, and then it all caved in. So yeah, just be ready. And I tell people, don't buy a home right now. Don't do that. Just wait 5 years and you'll get it for half price. No, anyways. But yeah, I kid. It's gonna. Hopefully, I'm wrong. But yeah, I definitely would appreciate that, because I don't have the time to do all these, like, you got to like research them, right?
That's why people don't do it. So
yeah, so I'll do it. I'm getting better as a voter. I used to not vote at all, so I'm climbing the voting ladder. And I have a degree in political science, right?
And you're native. You need your voice to be heard.
Natives don't vote, though. I think that's the most native thing about me. No, I'm just joking. No, but I kid. I'm getting my wife to finally vote, and that's a good one to end on. So everyone, get out there and vote, voice your opinion, and learn before you just start filling in boxes, right? So, all right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this next coming weeks. We got Alcatraz next week. It's going to start really, picking up, and it's going to get real contemporary. So it's going to get, I think, sometimes more, it's not really history as we're going forward. It's like today. So we're going to go towards the present, and gaming. We're going to finally get there. And then at the end, we'll do historical trauma. So just kind of giving you a kind of projection. And please do your readings. Please keep up on your assignments. And let me know if anything comes up, and I'll be here for you. All right? Cool.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.